Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Water Parks and Wildlife Committee. We're going to get started as a subcommittee
We need a Republican member, I think.
as soon as we get a Republican member. Are you? Mr. Berryhill is not a member today. All right, so stay tuned. As soon as we get a Republican member, we will start as a subcommittee. And it looks like Mr. Berryhill is here first, so he'll lead off this morning. Never have I been so glad to see a Republican. Good morning, everyone. We, pardon my voice, I've got some allergies as I suspect many of you do as well. We are going to begin this hearing as a subcommittee, and we'll begin with item 3, Mr. Bill Berryhill. I want to just make sure everyone knows that item 4, AJR 38 by Ms. Caballero, is going to be taken off calendar. We're going to attempt to have a hearing in May that will address that one while we keep working on it. And then on consent is SB 808 by Senator Wolk, right? That's still on consent. And we have a special guest with us here today, Assemblymember Mike Feuer, who's filling in for Assemblymember Lowenthal, filling in for Member Salas, and we're going to have a couple of vacancies on the committee as well, so we're down a few members. So enough housekeeping. Welcome, Mr. Berryhill.
Welcome. Well, I want to thank the chair and the members for allowing us to present today. I bring before you today AB 2427. This bill simply adds a short section to the Fish and Game Code stipulating that neither the Fish and Game Commission nor the Department of Fish and Game may impose an absolute ban on hunting or taking of game in California. In light of my ACA 11, which we heard a few weeks ago, it attempted to secure a constitutional right to hunt. I believe this bill is a significant and reasonable compromise. The committee raised a number of concerns over the term absolute prohibition in my bill. I have made a commitment to the committee to take amendments to define this term in a way that would not impede the Commission's ability to restrict hunting when and where necessary. I received a very encouraging email from committee staff this morning on possible amendments by adding the term statewide and permanent to the term absolute prohibition. I'm hopeful that these changes will relieve the committee's concerns, and I believe that they will help to clarify the original intent of this bill. If for whatever reason this language is insufficient, I'm absolutely willing to make a commitment right now to work with the committee staff until we arrive on amendment language that we can all agree on and move forward. Or else I will support pulling the bill back to committee. When I presented ACA 11, some of the members of this committee expressed conceptual support for the right to hunt in California, but had concerns that a constitutional amendment was overly prescriptive and costly as well. And I get that. That's why I've brought this bill before you. If there are any concerns with it, at any time, we can amend this code. We don't have to go to the voters to change it. It's simply going to be in statute. Therefore, if the members of the committee truly believe that the citizens of California should be able to hunt in this state, there is absolutely no reason to oppose this bill. Mr. Chair and members, I am hopeful that those of you who are members of the Legislative Outdoor Sporting Caucus will support this legislation as it goes to the very core, the very mission for which that caucus was created. And with that, I thank you for your time and respectfully ask you for an aye vote.
Thank you.
With me,
welcome.
Ed Worley.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ed Worley with the National Rifle Association. I want to thank the committee staff for working with us on the bill. We're the sponsor of the bill, and CRPA is a co-sponsor of the bill. And we want to work with you guys to draft the language as best we can to fulfill the functions of everything we want to do. We want to protect our right of our members to go out and harvest game in a way that's consistent with the Fish and Game trying to manage the resource. And we want to work with you to be consistent for your concerns also. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Tom Pedersen, California Rifle and Pistol Association. I'd just like to reiterate what was said, that there's no intent in this bill to prevent regulating hunting activity as it relates to bag limits and taking of game to maintain viable wildlife populations in the state. I think the most important part of this bill is that it actually acknowledges the legitimacy of hunting as a time-honored tradition in our state, and would be very helpful to the hunters of the state to be acknowledged in that respect. So would only request your aye vote on this, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Mark Henley with the California Outdoor Heritage Alliance. We believe the bill would help to better protect hunting in the long term, but also help ensure that it would be reasonably regulated as it should be according to the best available science. So we urge your support. Thank you.
Great. Before we call for other witnesses in support and in opposition, Mr. Berryhill, let's just make sure that everybody's clear on what you're proposing to do with the bill here today. one of the issues that has been flagged in the committee analysis was that the language regarding no absolute prohibition on hunting was ambiguous. It looked like there may be lots of legal questions, how it related to the Fish and Game Commission's authority to regulate hunting and to impose conditions on hunting, both place conditions, species conditions, manner of hunting conditions, all of which I understand you're not trying to prevent. And so you are accepting the term absolute permanent statewide prohibition on hunting. And as I would understand that term, what you're basically saying is you want a statute that says the Fish and Game Commission can never completely ban hunting throughout the state for all species. So with that, let me ask if there are other witnesses in support that would like to register their position. Any witnesses in opposition?
Good morning. My name is Nicole Paquette, and I'm with the Humane Society of the United States. And on behalf of our 1.3 million members, we are opposed to AB 2427. The Constitution under Article 4, Section 20 already grants the power to the Fish and Game Commission to regulate hunting activities in the state. And we simply fail to see the need to specifically preclude in statute certain management options from the Commission's toolbox. There may come a time when the Commission must act to preclude a specific hunting practice based on biological, ethical, ecosystem, and/or animal welfare factors. In addition, I'm not aware of any attempt by the Commission currently to ban hunting in any form. In fact, the Commission typically does the exact opposite by expanding hunting. So this bill appears to be a bill in search of a problem. We would urge that you oppose this bill. Again, I'm unclear exactly what the proposed amendment would be. Would that mean all species, or what about a particular species of animal? If there is an animal that actually is on the verge of extinction or in danger by a specific area, will this particular bill preclude the Commission from acting under their authority to regulate hunting in a different form or manage that population in a different manner? So we urge your opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? All right, let's bring it back to the committee. Any questions or comments from committee members? Mr. Berryhill.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Berryhill, was it last week or so that you were here? I can't remember when you had your constitutional. Some folks mentioned that this was a problem in search, or that it was in search of a problem, this bill. Can you comment on that? And I got a second question for you folks. As was mentioned, in fishing, they can ban salmon. They can ban a lot of different things at certain times based on, if there are any fish. Is this like bill to that?
Yeah, unlike the fishing, that is actually in the Constitution, but similar in the sense that it doesn't seek to. It just simply seeks to statewide, long-term, not allow banning of hunting in California. It's very simple. As to answer your first question, as Assemblyman Nava rightfully pointed out, commissioners serve at the whim of the governor. So depending on who the governor is, he can pull them and appoint the folks that he believes represent his ideals. And so this bill would simply ensure that no matter what the makeup is of that commission, that hunters and the industries that support them, and that's very important to understand, the industries that support them will to be able to continue to do business here, and the hunters will have a future in California. As we all know in this building, sometimes the best solutions are preventative, same way they are in health. Should we really wait until it's too late to try to attempt and secure the right to hunt in California? That would have been troublesome approach for the Founding Fathers if they had used that same logic in drafting the Bill of Rights. So this is preventative. This is simply a philosophy for California that we believe in the right to hunt and securing it for future generations.
Thank you.
Let's take a moment to establish a quorum while we have it.
Hoffman,
Present.
Fuller,
Present.
Anderson, Arambula, Berryhill, Blumenfield, Caballero, De La Torre, Fletcher, Lowenthal, Fuhrer, Yamada.
We have a quorum. Were there other questions, Mr. Berryhill? Yes, Ms. Fuller.
So, Mr. Berryhill, am I to understand that as long as something has not been banned in state law, that it is a distinct possibility that it could be banned at some time in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, with all respect to the Humane Society, they don't. It's their belief system, and that's fine. But they believe in not hunting. You could get a governor that believes absolutely not hunting, who would then appoint a commission who, with the help of this, would have a little harder time completely banning hunting statewide.
So that's your first point, basically, is that it is bannable now because it hasn't been distinctly put in statute that we can't. And so you're taking a proactive stance. And your second point here is that the industry that brings, quite a lot of good economic stimulus to our state feels it is extremely important to guarantee the survival of this industry. And so that's why you're coming forward. Is that true?
Yeah, that is correct, Assemblyman Fuller. I think symbolically it's very important to show those industries that support outdoor sports and hunting that California is committed to to the long term.
So on that basis, I'll be supporting your bill.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions or comments of committee members? Seeing none, Mr. Berryhill, I just want to take the chair's prerogative to say I appreciate you working so hard to try to get this bill to a place where the legal questions and policy questions raised in our analysis could be addressed. I think you've come a long way. I frankly think you're trying to do something important here. I agree with you that hunting is an important part of our traditions and our culture here in the state. I would hate to think of a state where hunting somehow would be banned permanently for all species throughout the state. I don't think that will ever happen. I don't think there's a real chance that anybody would ever even try to make it happen, but I agree with you. I wouldn't want to see that ever happen. And I do also agree that the hunting community are important partners in conservation as well as part of the economy and the culture and tradition of this state. That said, I personally think there's still some pretty significant problems with what is proposed here, and am not quite sure that this is the best way to advance what otherwise I think is a very worthy objective that you're setting out to do. So I'm going to have no recommendation for the committee. I urge folks to vote their conscience. I'll be voting mine, and we'll sort of see where it goes.
I'll move the bill.
All right, and so that is a motion as amended to include the phrase absolute permanent statewide prohibition, correct? All right, and so a motion by Assemblymember Fuller, second by Assemblymember Fletcher, and a question by Ms. Caballero.
Good morning, Mr. Berryhill. I apologize for being late. I just had a couple of questions, and I apologize if you've already answered them, and they had to do with, as the chair was articulating, I'm concerned about the absolute prohibition language. And you and I have had a conversation about this, and I did not get from that conversation that you intended to be quite so absolute is the language here. So the question I had is whether you're including state parks and marine protected areas, wildlife sanctuaries, and species that might be endangered or on the status which is vulnerable. And I was wondering if you could address
It's
that.
not our intent, and we're working with the committee on language to clarify that. So clarify absolute. Our language would be, don't have that in front of me here, would be,
Absolute permanent statewide prohibition.
yeah, would include permanent statewide prohibition. Anyway, Anna, we're working with the staff to clarify that. So it's not our intent to do that.
Well, I did not believe that it was.
Yeah.
It's not in the language right now. I'm willing to support it getting out of this committee on the other understanding that that's not what you intended and that you intend to make amendments. And if you do, then I think I'll feel better about it.
Sure.
But
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah.
wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Great. If there are no other questions, Mr. Berryhill, I'll invite you to close.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, members. Another point in closing is that the landowners that do so much in conservation and in an attempt to propagate species, going forward, knowing that right to hunt is never going to be taken away, hopefully, that this will help in them making plans moving forward. I myself, as well as Tom, have a wetland preservation project that, you know what, if you believe that they might someday take hunting away, would have never happened. So with that, I thank you for allowing us to present today, and I respectfully ask you all for an aye vote.
Thank you. Clerk will call the roll.
Do pass as amended. Huffman?
No.
Huffman, no. Fuller?
Aye.
Fuller, aye. Anderson? Aye. Anderson, aye. Arambula? Arambula, not voting. Berryhill? Aye. Berryhill, aye. Blumenfield? Caballero? Caballero, aye. Delatorre? Fletcher? Aye. Fletcher, aye. Lowenthal? No. Lowenthal, no. Fear? No. Fear, no. Yamada? No. Yamada, no.
Needs two. That bill needs two and is on call. Thank you, Mr. Berryhill. Thank you to your
very much.
sponsors as well.
Mr. Chair, can I move the consent calendar?
Please.
I so move.
Second.
All right. Please call the roll on the consent calendar.
SB 808, do pass consent to appropriations. Huffman?
Aye.
Huffman, aye. Fuller? Anderson? Fuller, aye. Anderson, aye. Arambula? Arambula, aye. Tom Berryhill? Tom Berryhill, aye. Blumenfield? Caballero? Caballero, aye. Delatorre? Fletcher? Fletcher, aye. Lowenthal?
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Fuhrer? Fuhrer, aye. Yamada? Yamada, aye.
Consent calendar passes, and we will welcome Senator Simitian to present on Senate Joint Resolution number 18. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Let me begin by thanking Assemblymember Huffman and the chair and Assemblymembers Blumenfield and Salas for their role as co-authors on the bill. Mr. Chairman and members, SJR 18 simply encourages the federal government to follow California's lead on aquaculture standards by developing a federal regulatory framework that is at least as protective as our own California Sustainable Oceans Act. The California Sustainable Oceans Act, our standards, were established by Senate Bill 201, which I authored back in 2006. The measure was designed to take a comprehensive approach to both protect the ocean environment, but also allow for the development of aquaculture off the coast of California. The Sustainable Oceans Act here in California requires a complete programmatic environmental impact report to minimize the adverse ecological impacts of marine aquaculture, and takes a global rather than piecemeal look at the entire coastal ecosystem, which is a valuable social but also economic resource for Californians. This resolution simply requests the U.S. Congress to develop a comprehensive federal regulatory framework at least as protective as codified in our own law, and it respectfully opposes the expansion of marine aquaculture off the Pacific coast without such a framework in place. The bill is sponsored by the Ocean Conservancy. Be happy to take any questions, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
And just for clarification, Senator, this would apply only to federal waters and not to the area within the waters of California.
Members,
if I could be, offer just sort of a brief contextual observation. It strikes me that too often we find ourselves responding to problems after they have developed rather than anticipating potential problems and finding a way to ensure that we avoid those problems at some point in the future. I was at a community event a couple years ago in my district, and people were asking me about the kind of work I did, and I said, there were probably 75 people. I said, how many of you are aware of the fact that I have authored legislation on the issue of aquaculture? And not a single hand in the room went up, and everybody chuckled a little bit. And I said, how many of you remember the recent newspaper stories you read about tainted fish from China, which posed a public health hazard? And about half the hands in the room went up. And I said, if we have done our job right in California, you'll never read a story like that about fish farmed off the coast of California, because we will have put a system in place that allows the development of responsible aquaculture, but that provides the kinds of protections that weren't in place when there were fish farmed in pools of their own fecal matter or in ponds of chemicals, which ultimately posed a public health process. This issue is taking off around the country and around the globe. A significant portion of the fish that we eat as food is farmed these days. The reason I did the bill back in 2006 was because the Department of Commerce was calling for a 5-fold increase in fish farming. People saw it as both an economic development opportunity and also a way to provide food security. My measure did not oppose or inhibit that. It simply said, if it's coming, let's be prepared for it. That's essentially what we're asking for now on a federal level, where the issue has picked up steam. There is federal legislation pending. Seems like a good time to provide some guidance on this issue.
Great. All right. Assemblymember Lowenthal. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment how supportive I am of this idea. You know, I represent a coastal area and have been very involved in what had been degradation of our ocean waters by ships. We've tried to protect our oceans from the, by using ballast systems and better understanding that. But I've also had an opportunity to travel in Asia and seen some of the fish farming that's gone on there that actually has tainted the waters, and you referred to that. So I'm very supportive of this. I appreciate your work. I do have a question, and I don't know if you know this, about how the fish farming on land is carried out, because you're talking about fish farming in ocean waters. Do you know what the regulations are, and are they standardized?
I'm afraid I'm a little stale on this issue. 4 years ago, I could have told you everything you wanted to know about sea lice. Today, I'm a little off my game on but you've correctly observed the measure does not speak to, nor did the Sustainable Oceans Act speak to, on-land fish farming activities. We're talking specifically about California waters, as the chair pointed out, and we're talking specifically about fin fish aquaculture. But I'm happy to follow up with you and get you some information from our office.
But our state jurisdiction would extend both from inland aquaculture out to the first 3 miles off our shore. So whatever protections we have in our, from the Department of Fish and Game for aquaculture right now would pertain to inland aquaculture as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Assemblymember Imana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Smitty, and thank you for bringing this forward in light of some of the comments about the international community. I was just going to say that perhaps you shouldn't stop here, but seek to make sure that this is sent to the UN as well. Certainly, food security, as we become, unfortunately, more and more dependent upon imports because of other threats to agriculture, and other, food sources. Perhaps, you can take that in consideration for the next round. Thank you.
Let me ask if there are any other witnesses in support. Any witnesses in support? We haven't had any yet. So. Come on forward.
Good morning, Mr.
Good morning.
Members of the committee. My name is Jamie Farrow. I'm the Aquaculture Policy Analyst at Ocean Conservancy. I'm here today in support of SGR 18. We're pleased to sponsor this timely resolution. Ocean Conservancy concludes that if decisive action is not taken by U.S. Congress soon, aquaculture or fish farming will emerge around the U.S. and federal waters outside of a strong, coordinated regulatory system that matches California's common sense approach to marine fin fish farming. Our state's Sustainable Oceans Act helps to guard against the risks associated with fin fish farming in California waters, including pollution from waste feed and the release of drugs and chemicals, spread of disease to wild fish, and impacts to marine wildlife as well. A similar comprehensive federal framework to address fish farming adjacent to our state waters is needed before industry expansion occurs. Despite the real and scientifically documented risks from ocean fish farming, efforts to develop this industry continue, while the United States lacks a science-based framework to ensure that it does not damage our oceans. So across the country, we have federal agencies, we have fishery management councils, and private entities expanding ahead of this national framework. And it's critical that we get out ahead of this problem, as Senator Simitian mentioned. So to ensure the continued health of our state's ocean ecosystems and our consumers, the simple resolution encourages Congress to adopt a national framework with environmental standards that are at least as robust as California's. Thank you for your time, and Ocean Conservancy urges an aye vote on SGR 18.
Next.
Good morning. Crystal Mullenkamp on behalf of Monterey Bay Aquarium in support. As the Senator pointed out, there is federal legislation that's pending on this subject, and indeed NOAA will actually be in California this week to hold listening sessions on what a national policy on aquaculture should look like. So we really appreciate the Senators taking this up and the legislature advancing this to influence that policy. Thank you.
Chair, committee members, my name is Jim Metropolis with the Sierra Club. We are also in support of SJR 18, and as the previous witness mentioned, NOAA is having a listening session on Thursday in Menlo Park in talking about a framework in discussing federal regulations on this very issue. Ask for your support.
All right. Any other witnesses in support? Any witnesses in opposition?
Mr. Chairman and members, Vern Gehring, representing the Food and Water Watch national organization monitoring consumer interests. First, I want to apologize to the author again for our late opposition to his measure, and also to the chairman. We realize that we are late, but we see this measure significantly different than the proponents and the author does. Just briefly, if the chairman would allow me, I'll highlight a couple of concerns. Our hope actually is that we can convince the author to maybe work with us on some amendments. We think that's feasible as far as our concerns. We're concerned that the resolution before you doesn't really incorporate several key applicable state laws that are pertinent to aquaculture issues. For example, the California law prohibits farming salmon, non-native, and transgenic fish species in aquaculture settings, and this resolution doesn't require that standard in federal law. The federal measure H.R. 4363, which this resolution is intended to support and will be used to support, again, is at odds in several ways with state law. And I'll just share one example. We have several. State law requires that site restoration at the end of aquaculture operations be undertaken by the permittee or the operator. The federal legislation that's being considered does not require that. We think ocean farming is an industry looking for a toehold in the United States. There are no fin fish farming operations currently in U.S. jurisdiction oceans. Multiple checks and balances and the combination of environmental threats and economic hurdles has prevented this damaging industry for over 30 years, ever since the National Aquaculture Act was passed. What it needs, actually, to get established is a streamlined permitting process, which this measure calls for. Instead of ensuring marine protection from damaging farming, this measure will clear the way for permits to finally flow. The analysis is correct. Your committee analysis is correct. There are no comparable federal regulations at present. However, that's not the same as saying that there are no federal protections, because there clearly are federal protections in place. There are a number of problems, public health and environmental problems from open ocean, large aquaculture operations. Your analysis just touches on the surface. I won't take any more time to go through it. I think you're aware of it. Well, I would like to actually mention one. Ocean farming feeds wild-caught fish to farmed fish. Typically, 2 to 6 pounds of wild-caught fish are needed to produce 1 pound of farmed fish, oftentimes in areas jeopardizing prey populations of wild fish that are necessary for marine birds and mammals to survive. we think a streamlined federal permitting process will actually accelerate ocean fish farming in California when our understanding of and the tools available to control the environmental and economic risks do not warrant such acceleration. So we have those concerns. We think there are some amendments to the measure that might address those, and we at this point would ask your no vote.
Thank you, Mr. Gehring. Any other witnesses in opposition? All right, seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Fuhrer, a second by Assemblymember Lowenthal. I just want to say that I reread the resolution while we were talking here, and I just have a very different take than Food and Water Watch. I think when you are codifying a request that it be at least as protective as what is already codified in California law, it's a real stretch to argue that somehow that means that you can include things that are banned under California law, like transgenic fish. So I'm not persuaded by the opposition points. With that said, I'll recommend an aye vote and invite you to close. Senator.
Thank you. I have the same view. Members, this was a fascinating debate that took place back in 2005, 2006, because there was a group of folks who said this is a bad thing and you shouldn't permit it. And my view was that debate's already been had. Take a look around the globe and you'll see that it's a little late to have that debate. The debate we ought to be having is, if this is going to happen, how can it happen in a way that is responsible? And that we were kidding ourselves that if we thought by not addressing the issue that somehow that was going to make the world a better place. Quite the contrary, as I said. I thought we'd end up with the problem without having any process in place. Two observations, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your patience. The first is I thought this process actually worked well in 2005-06, which was we developed the bill in 2005. It had been approved by both houses of the legislature. It was ready to go to the governor, and the governor's director of resources, Mr. Chrisman, called and said, we apologize, we're a little late to the party. Would you work with us on some amendments so that we can recommend support to the administration? And I said, great. And we ended up spending another 4 or 5 months sitting down, going line by painful line through the bill, so that ultimately this was a measure that the Schwarzenegger administration thought it could support after careful attention by the Resources Secretary. I thought that was a good thing. The last thing I wanted to say, though, Mr. Chairman, is there's an economic resource at issue here as well. The analysis that your staff provides specifically calls out the fact that if this is not properly handled, it has the potential to threaten the commercial fishing industry off the coast of California. If it is not properly handled, it has the potential to threaten tourism off the coast of California. And if it is properly handled, then there is the potential for economic development with responsible aquaculture. I think all of that is where we would like to go. I think your reading of the resolution is consistent with my own. I appreciate your patience, and I would respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator. Please call the roll.
Be adopted. Huffman?
Aye.
Huffman, aye. Fuller? No. Fuller, no. Anderson? Arambula? Arambula, aye. Berryhill? No. Berryhill, no. Blumenfield? Caballero? Aye. Caballero, aye. Delatorre? Fletcher? Lowenthal? Lowenthal, aye. Fuhrer? Fuhrer, aye. Yamada? Aye. Yamada, aye.
That resolution is out.
Thank you,
congratulations. That brings us, is Ms. Huber still here? Welcome. Come on up. This is our penultimate bill of the day. We have 2 more. And you'll be presenting on AB 1594. Good morning.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do want to thank the committee for having this bill heard today. As you know, most of you know, this is the reintroduction of a bill that was introduced during the special session on water. We did not have a chance to have a policy committee hearing on that bill before it died. So this is our first chance to really openly discuss an issue that I think was critically missing in the discussions that we were having on water. Now, this bill does not attempt to undo everything that was done in the water discussions, but it does attempt to address something that I think is fundamentally missing from the water package as it moved through the legislature, and that's oversight and accountability. There are 2 goals of AB 1594. The first one is that if the current process recommends that a new infrastructure project be built, a peripheral canal, whatever you want to call it, if that proposal is made, that the Legislative Analyst Office do a full fiscal feasibility so we know exactly how much that infrastructure project is going to cost. The second piece is that there then be legislative oversight, that the legislature vote up or down, do we want to spend that amount of money on that large infrastructure project? So we'll be fully informed by the entire process as was set up with all of the water package that moved through the legislature last year. We'll have all of that information, all of the scientific data, and we'll know how much it's going to cost the water ratepayers in the state of California. And at that time, we need an appropriate check and balance on the process as it was put forward, that the legislature then be able to say yes or no, up or down, and that is the simple goal of AB 1594. I think there are some concerns addressed in the committee analysis, which I'm happy to have a dialogue with the committee members. If any of those are concerns to you, I have responses to all of them. But before I do that, I do want to add that there was some late support that was not on the committee analysis from Restore the Delta, Greater Stockton Chamber of Commerce, and the Planning and Conservation League, and in addition to those others that are supporting it listed in the committee analysis. And I have with me here today San Joaquin County Supervisor Larry Rustaller on behalf of San Joaquin County to speak in support of the bill, as well as a representative from the Sacramento Region County Sanitation District who will address other concerns about mitigation that my legislation helps to address with the chair's permission.
All right, thank you. Assembly Member Huber, before we get to your witnesses, and we want to hear from them, let me correct a misstatement I made a moment ago. The Simidian resolution is on call and needs one vote. It got 6, and so I misspoke on that. So with that, please present your first witness.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak on this, Chairman. I am Larry Rustaller from San Joaquin County, but I am speaking for the 5 Delta Coalition because Tuesdays is board day, and so I'm the only one that they could afford to not have around. So I'm here.
What does that say about you, Supervisor?
I guess they, I guess they just said, "Come on down, Larry." One of the main points is oversight. The role of the legislature is to provide that oversight to the state administration. The administration, in cooperation with the water contractors and other interested parties, is developing a conveyance system that could have serious consequences and impacts for the Delta County residents. This conveyance project is being studied and researched off budget, away from the public scrutiny, and despite being potentially the largest and most expensive public works project in the history of the state. The legislature must maintain that oversight. It would be a dereliction of your duty to abdicate that role given the potential scope and size of this project. AB 1594 is the mechanism to provide that legislative oversight. The fiscal analysis. Given the estimated cost of this project, possibly tens of billions of dollars, it is prudent and appropriate and reasonable to ask for a thorough, impartial, and timely fiscal analysis. We should not accept any costs or estimate on blind faith. Again, the conveyance project is being studied off budget, away from the public scrutiny. The public process has been absent to date. The public should know how much this project would cost, how it's going to impact their food supply, drinking water, our environment, and the communities and of the Delta. The Delta County residents must be considered in this process. It should never be acceptable to any member of the legislature or the public to put the needs or the wants of one region of the state ahead of those being and fundamental needs of others. The LAO report would outline these impacts and make them clear to the people in the North, the South, and the Delta. The Delta counties have and will continue to support the legislation and regulatory efforts towards a more sustainable water supply. We have urged regional solutions to the state's water problems. Contrary to most beliefs, we are not Dr. No. We understand the law has been passed, and we are ready to work not only as counties, but as our membership is also in the Delta Protection Commission. We wish to basically be part of this solution and not left on the sidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Craig Johns. I'm here today on behalf of Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District, provides sanitation collection and treatment services for about a little over 1 million people here in the Sacramento regional area. Sac Regional is not standing here to oppose the very delicate water package that was adopted last fall. We're simply here to state our support for Ms. Huber's bill for two primary reasons, both of which she highlighted in her introduction: the legislative oversight, particularly given some of the things that have been happening at the council, the Delta Stewardship Council, which the chair noted a few weeks ago in the Oversight Committee hearing, but more importantly on the issue of mitigation. SB 7X1 last fall does talk about some of the mitigation that needs to be considered and provided for before the construction of the new Delta conveyance facilities. But there are a lot of issues that were not dealt with, I think, sufficiently there, and particularly when one looks at the state of the polls showing very little support for the bond, the water bond itself. There's a real question about who's going to pick up the costs of the state side on all the mitigation that's related to the BDCP work that's been out there. It seems that having the LAO do an independent analysis of what those costs are going to be, both not only related to the construction of the whatever canal or facility they build, but also the costs on the environmental costs on the local folks here in the Delta. All those things need to be dealt with independently before I think an ultimate decision is made whether to construct this facility. And it seems like the legislature should retain that authority and that oversight. So with that, we support the bill and ask the committee's vote.
All right, thank you. And you, yes, let's invite any other witnesses in support to come on up at this time.
Mr. Chair, committee members, my name is Jim Metropolis for the Sierra Club. We also support 1594. I will add that the Bay Delta Conservation Planning process has been going on since mid-2006, and as of today, we still don't know what the project is. Is it a 15,000 CFS tunnel? Is it a 15,000 channel through the Delta? Is it a tunnel going under the shipping channel up to Sacramento? We have no idea what the project is. So at this time, certainly we would love scrutiny by the legislature and oversight by the legislature on a project of this magnitude. Doesn't just benefit people in the Delta, but it benefits people in Southern California that will probably be shocked by their rates increases if this project goes through. Thank you.
I am Dante John Nomalini. I'm the manager and co-counsel for the Central Delta Water Agency, and I've been asked to speak on behalf of the South Delta Water Agency as well. We support the bill, and I think it's important to understand our view. We, of course, are opposed to a peripheral canal, which we think will destroy the Delta and probably be a stranded asset for those who build it. But more importantly, we think that any kind of a Delta plan that comes out of the Stewardship Council should be reviewed by the legislature, because we view this as being an oriented process. And I'll give you one example. Secretary Chrisman, when he was Resources Secretary in Stockton, suggested that the steering committee was open to all comers to participate on an open forum without any pre-decision towards a peripheral canal or any other isolated or other facility. So we took him up on that, and we found out that we had to sign off on a statement of principles that said that the peripheral canal was the best solution. We couldn't do that, but clearly the process is tainted for those who have to make hard decisions as to how you want to spend your resources to try and better the water deliveries to your constituents. You're not getting an honest shot at the facts and the studies, in our opinion. So we think this ought to be a more generic effort. It ought to be broad. Everything the Delta plan should come back to the legislature so that you can do the final review. We think it's bad policy to let a governor appoint people who aren't elected, not subject to election and accountability to the people, to make these decisions on into the future past the term of the governor. So anyway, we support this bill. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Chairman, committee members, my name is Bill Wells. I'm the Executive Director of the California Delta Chambers and Visitors Bureau. We likewise support the bill. I've attended many water meetings over the last few years, and I've asked the DWR people many times about if they could give some examples of where a diversion like the Peripheral Canal has worked and not destroyed the existing waterway. In every case, they've said they'll get back to me, or a few times they've said, well, it's going to be an experiment. We don't know how it's going to work. Well, I can give you plenty of examples where it has not worked. Ironically, the Colorado River Delta was once the largest delta on the West Coast before the waters diverted, and nowadays the California Delta is the largest. Mono Lake, Owens Dry Lake, which used to be Owens Lake at one time, were destroyed by water diversions. Tulare Lake in the San Joaquin Valley was once the largest body of fresh water in the western United States. It's now a desert and farmlands. The San Joaquin River once teemed with fish until Friant Dam was installed and the water diverted out of there. The Tigris-Euphrates Delta, Saddam Hussein diverted that and virtually destroyed the delta there. So this is what easily could happen to the Sacramento Delta if we don't have enough oversight on this. I've read through the bill, and people opposing it, like Westlands Water District. Paul Rodriguez warns us of the dangers of food imported from Mexico and communist China, and you see signs along I-5 warning of food shortages. But according to the 2005-06 Westlands annual report, out of about 500,000 farm acres in production, about 145,000 of those acres were given to cotton, about 28%. And according to the California Cotton Ginners and Growers Association, about 90% of the cotton grown in California is exported. So it's not about food. It's also opposed by the Irvine Ranch Water District. In 2009, Phil Eisenberg, the chairman of the recently formed Delta Stewardship Council, his lobbying firm received $79,000 from Irvine Ranch Water District. Now, I understand Mr. Eisenberg has since resigned from his firm.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to, if you could, keep your comments. I'm trying not to cut anybody off, and I'm already showing quite a bit of leniency because we've already had our primary witnesses. But I don't want anyone to feel like there hasn't been a full discussion here today. I don't think we need to go into personal attacks on people sitting on boards and commissions. That's not germane to this bill.
Certainly, sir. I didn't mean it as a personal attack on him, just pointing out facts. Anyway, if I could just summarize, in 2005, there were 95 marinas in the Delta with about over 11,000 boat slips. They generated, I'm guessing, about $35 million per year in annual revenue. These also had ancillary businesses of restaurants, fuel repair businesses, and fishing supplies. This is all at risk if the Peripheral Canal is not managed properly. Statistically, the decline in the fish in the Delta is consistent with the increased water exports in spite of what is thrown out there, like ammonia in the Sacramento River sewer plant. Until recently, raw sewage was dumped in the river, the fish thrived, and just in the last 10 years when the water exports have increased is when there's been a problem with the fish. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
I absolutely did not mean that as a personal attack on Mr. Eisenberg.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Chair Huffman and committee members, my name is Barbara Berrigan-Perea with Restore the Delta. Restore the Delta and its 5,000 supporters fully support Assemblymember Huber's AB 1594, and we request the committee to vote in favor of it. The watershed, the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta watershed, is one of California's most valuable resources. We feel it's important, as stressed by other people who have testified, that the legislature maintain and exercise oversight over the Delta and not delegate the future of the Delta to unelected bureaucrats who may very well end up rubber stamping a process already in progress rather than analyzing a water conveyance project with a truly critical eye. The people of California and the people of the Delta deserve nothing less than assurance that a project of this magnitude will be subject to due process, with final decisions being made by public officials who we can hold accountable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, committee members. Yvonne Chambers, Planning and Conservation League. We support this bill, and we respectfully urge your aye vote.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Osha Meserve, and I'm here on behalf of Reclamation District 999 in the Clarksburg area of the Northern Delta. and we also support this legislation. Just quickly wanted to point out, in reviewing the opposition letters, there appears to be two main reasons that the opposition is asking you to vote no on this legislation. First, that it reverses or undermines the 2009 water package, and second, that the economic analysis required by the bill is already required. Both of these reasons are false. First, the bill does not undermine the water package. It simply provides an additional layer of protections that are still needed if new diversion works are to be put on the Sacramento River. Development of the appropriate body of law for the Delta and the complexity of it should be an iterative process, informed by our knowledge as it progresses. And the Delta communities and the environment still don't have the same level of protection, even as was provided in the 1980 legislation that authorized the canal. This legislation helps provide additional protections that are needed. Just quickly on the second point, existing law does not require the BDCP project applicants to provide a public economic analysis of the effect of building new conveyance on ratepayers or on the statewide taxpayer public. So this is very important for a project like this that will include a lot of public funding, even if it does have private funding as well, for this kind of analysis to be prepared and available to the public. So in conclusion, we believe it's appropriate for the legislature to provide these types of checks and balances on a project that will dramatically replumb the Delta. And if the final design of the project is as beneficial as the proponents of it claim, it should be no problem to receive the majority vote. So I urge the committee to advance this legislation, and to the extent any details need to be addressed and clarifications, to work with the author to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Kevin Kaufman. I'm the general manager of the Stockton East Water District. On behalf of our board of directors, I want to simply ask for your support of Member Huber's bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Other witnesses in support?
Yes. Good morning. My name is Barbara Daly, and I'm a Delta resident, but more importantly, I'm a California resident, a Northern California resident specifically, and a resident of the United States. I am not against securing water, drinking water for people, or taking care of our planet and the creatures and the plants who live here, but I'm totally for doing it in the right way and for the right reasons. So I would like to say that the public deserves to know the truth as we go through this water process, and I don't feel that our public is being told the whole truth, the real total reasons why and how. I feel that oversight and accountability are critical for California, as the water bills that were passed are setting new water precedent throughout our country and perhaps the world. I ask you to move cautiously and carefully and give full consideration to giving full oversight to water contractors. Private, from my viewpoint, this conveyance project is privatizing and marketing our water. The California public needs more consideration in all of this legislation, and you are elected to protect us. Not only protect the economic interests of California, where the science is being directed, and it's being said that water is more valuable than agriculture in California by the scientists. So I ask you not to only protect the economic interests of California and a few corporations, but please protect the real people and the ecology of California that will sustain us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair and committee members, my name is Kim Glazard with Organic Sacramento and Save the Delta. I'd just like to echo what's been said here. I think it's most people have spelled it out very clearly. And I'd support in what was said in support of Assemblymember Huber's bill. We feel it is important for the legislature to act responsibly and do a full fiscal feasibility study as due diligence to the ratepayers of California, especially in this extremely economically challenging time. So we would respectfully request that an aye vote be supported here to advance this legislation.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support this morning? If not, we'll invite the witnesses in opposition to come forward. You're welcome. Good morning. Who's first?
I guess I drew that straw. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Kathy Cole with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. You and your colleagues took bold and comprehensive action shaped by the legislative package that was passed last fall, and it's actually precisely what California needed to move the co-equal goals forward. The historic Delta Policy Water Management Package wisely chose to set achievable and balanced set of state policies to restore the Delta estuary and improve reliability of water supplies. It did call out for a full range of conveyance alternatives. It set forth benchmarks, milestones, accountability back to the legislature. This policy package must be able to move forward, and we urge you to resist attempts to reopen the package and rework that important policy framework. And for this reason, we have to oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Ed Manning of KP on behalf of Westlands Water District, Mojave Water Agency in San Bernardino County, and Western Municipal Water District in Riverside County. This bill, I was trying to think of an analogy. The movie Groundhog Day came to mind, where Bill Murray gets to relive the day over and over again.
And he learned to be a good piano player.
Yes, exactly. Well, let's hope we at least get that out of this. Every issue that's been raised, and the chairman knows better than anyone, having lived last year's water debate, and ultimately, I think we hope a productive product for the future of the state. Every issue that's been raised here was raised last year, multiple times in multiple hearings, was raised in the negotiations, and has been addressed, not to everyone's liking, but has been addressed in SB X71, the Smithian bill, for example. And I don't have my dog-eared copy of it, but I'll give you plenty of examples. The SAC Sanitation District, they didn't like the mitigation language that ended up in the bill, but there is language in the bill that Senator Steinberg agreed to and asked Westlands Met and other parties to agree to. It was extremely difficult to negotiate and is in the legislation. This would reopen that. The makeup of the Delta Stewardship Council was called into question by Mr. Namalini. The composition and the process of what happens to the Delta plan after it's developed was questioned by the witness. Mitigation standards in general. Every single issue that was just raised in testimony are the issues that we lived through and had difficult negotiations over, and ultimately a complex product and number of bills that resulted in the Delta package. The worst thing we can do now, the Delta Stewardship Council was just appointed. The worst thing we could do now is reopen that fight as opposed to trying to be constructive and work through a difficult process on the development of the Delta plan, et cetera. So for those reasons, and the other issue I should make clear, there is no money in the bond for the peripheral canal. The legislation prohibits state funding for the peripheral canal. So to insinuate that somehow there's state funding involved in the funding of the peripheral canal is just absolutely not true. So happy to provide more technical testimony on the mitigation standard in the bill and what it would mean, but we hope the committee will protect the integrity of last year's work product. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next witness.
Mr. Chairman, members, I am Ron Davis with the Association of California Water Agencies. We're here in opposition to this measure for the reasons stated. In particular, it is very important that we protect the integrity of the package that was put together last year. Obviously, a very carefully, very delicate, balanced, negotiated solution to try and to address a number of issues, including the Delta solution. Resolving the Delta issue is one of our key blueprint goals as an association, so therefore we would urge you not to reopen the discussion, protect the integrity of the package that was put together last year, and urge your no vote on today's AB 1594.
All right, thank you.
Committee, this is Gail Dullhant with Western Growers, and I must echo the concerns that were stated here today. We do oppose this measure and do believe that it does set up roadblocks for the reliable movement of water. We oppose the bill.
All right, thank you.
Mike, go ahead, Mike.
Michael Arnold, representing the Three Valleys Municipal Water District in Southern California. And I would just draw the committee's attention to the excellent analysis done by your committee staff, especially page 5, the first paragraph, where a big concern about this piece of legislation should be that it is overly broad in its drafting and could serve as a bar to any new conveyance of any kind ever being constructed. And that first paragraph on page 5 really sets it forth in a precise fashion. I would direct your attention to that, and we are in opposition.
Mr. Chairman and members, Bob Reeb with Reeb Government Relations. Today, on behalf of the San Joaquin Valley Ag Water Committee, East Valley Water District, and Desert Water Agency, my state water project clients, Mr. Chairman and members, entered into a contractual relationship with the State Water Project for the delivery of a reliable water supply. My clients pay a fixed cost related to that project, whether 100% of their contractual entitlement is received or not. It is well known that the current conveyance scheme in the Delta is not providing a reliable water supply, and it's one of a number of stressors to the ecosystem that is causing harm to fisheries. We've lost the operation of this key investment in the project to the federal courts. I think that's unacceptable given the threat to the state's economy and potentially to public health and safety if we lose the Delta and that conveyance facility. The legislature approved Delta facilities in the Burns-Porter Act in 1960. The voters approved that. My clients vehemently opposed this bill as an unnecessary reopening of the package last year. We would ask for a no vote.
Thank you. Next witness.
Mr. Chair and members, Kyle Packham with the California Special Districts Association, representing over 1,000 special districts and affiliate members, including water districts, irrigation districts, and many others. We are in opposition to the bill. I would associate our members with the comments previously made and respectfully ask for your no vote. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Jeffrey Volberg for the San Diego County Water Authority. The Water Authority opposes the bill for reasons already stated. Urge your no vote.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Louis Brown on behalf of the Friant Water Authority, also opposed for the original statements made. Also, we represent the California Cotton Growers and Ginners Association, and while they haven't taken a position yet on the bill, they do take offense to the inappropriate and inaccurate statements made about the industry earlier. Thank you.
Jennifer West, representing Inland Empire Utilities Agency and Alameda County Water District, strongly opposed to the bill for the reasons previously stated.
Valerie Nero for the California Chamber of Commerce. Last year's water deal was so difficult to negotiate. We hate to have it open up again, not at this point. So we oppose the bill.
Julie McClay, representing the Santa Clara Valley Water District. We also oppose the bill and urge your no vote.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Mark Thiessen with the Gualco Group on behalf of the Alameda County Flood Control and Water Conservation District Zone 7 and the Kern County Water Agency for all of the points that the previous witnesses made. Both of those entities are strongly opposed to this measure. Thank you.
Good morning, Dennis Albiani with California Advocates on behalf of Castaic Lake Water Agency. We are a state water contractor, and therefore we are hoping that the complex water deal results in a reliable water supply. Thank you. We urge your opposition to this bill.
All right, any other witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, we will come back to the committee, and I just want to say a few words and maybe invite your response, Assemblymember Huber, as chair. And the first is to say that I don't think that there is an assembly district anywhere in the state that has a member that is more zealously and passionately representing their interests. So I think you are doing what your constituents would ask you to do, and no one should question that. And I have a lot of respect for how diligent you're being in pushing this issue. I had actually share some of the concerns that I think are inspiring this bill. I am concerned, as anybody who has sat in this committee during our several oversight proceedings knows, I believe pretty strongly in oversight and am asking a lot of hard questions of the BDCP process and others. I am concerned that BDCP is looking only at really big facilities designed and assumed to operate in a way that would increase diversions from the Delta. That's not okay, in my opinion, and I don't see that as consistent with the package that we passed last year. And I intend to continue very diligently exercising that oversight role. So I think you and I have some common cause, at least to that extent. I'm also one who is on record believing that if the administration or anyone else proposes a facility as big as what some are pushing for in BDCP, I think it would require legislative approval right now. I have certainly maintained the position that that would be so different than what was authorized in the original state water project that it would need to come back to the legislature. And so that gets at one of my biggest concerns, actually, about the bill as drafted, which is you can do the math. You know where the members of this body live and the interests they represent. And if you wanted to tee up an up or down vote on this issue, I'm not sure it's going to come out the way you would like in the State Assembly. And I am concerned that what it would do is actually create a record that would make it harder for those of us that believe a huge facility that, along the lines that some are proposing, requires legislative approval. I think it could actually have a backfiring effect. So I am concerned about that, and I've offered to work with you on trying to set up some trigger points. Maybe there are some certain sizing triggers that would justify a legislative role. And I respect the fact that you have declined to do that. But that has been an interesting possibility for me, and unfortunately we were unable to work that out. I'm concerned that there are no limits in scale or scope in the bill right now. It basically, as worded, says any peripheral canal. So we know that, for example, the East Bay Mud just finished a peripheral canal, the Freeport facility. There wasn't a lot of opposition to it. It sort of flew under the radar, but they're taken out from the very point that many that are currently proposing a new Delta conveyance are suggesting as a diversion point for the state and federal water projects. I think to intelligently move this discussion forward, we have to talk about all of the different myriad possibilities for how conveyance might work, including different sizes and different operating scenarios. And so I'm troubled that this is a little bit too blunt for an issue that I think requires a little more nuance. And so with those concerns about the wisdom of teeing this issue up in the way that you have, and with my great respect for you representing the interests of your district, I'm just going to state one other concern, and that is that the very broad language requiring no impact to any existing water supply, I think, is very problematic. I think no matter how you feel about Delta conveyance, that's a pretty troubling precedent, and is pretty hard to justify in light of the authority that we vest in the State Water Board and in light of 100 years of jurisprudence on reasonable and beneficial use and water rights, et cetera. So I think there's some problems with the bill. I'm not going to be making any recommendation, and we'll see where it goes. So you're welcome to respond to those points, but that was just my candid view of what you're working on here.
I feel like I've been silent for about 10 minutes here.
Did I bloviate for that long?
No, for both the support and opposition. I want to thank the chair for the gracefulness that you showed in allowing everyone to really voice their concerns. A lot of what was said in the support and opposition really isn't what this bill is about. And I just want to kind of bring the discussion back because there's a lot of the rehashing the old arguments of what happened during last year's water package, and a lot of let's not unravel or undo, and that's not the intention of this bill at all. And if it reads that way, if there's a word that can be tweaked here or there to change that perception, I'd be happy to do it. Because if you could imagine the water package as a ball that's kind of moving forward now, and that was what was wrapped up in the whole package, and it's going and it's moving, and there is nothing about this bill that reopens that can of worms. It doesn't change the membership of the Delta Stewardship Council. It doesn't change the BDC process. That's not the intent of the bill. So that ball just keeps moving. All this does is put a check at the end. That when we get through the entire process, all the work and all the well thought out and all well-intentioned proposals that were put in that carefully negotiated water package, when we get to the end, will the legislature have the opportunity to ask the question of how did that process work? Was it how it was supposed to work? What's it going to cost? Is it going to cost what people thought it was going to cost when we started that process? And really being able to ask those questions and making it clear that we will continue to have that oversight. That's what this bill's about. That if the new language is troubling, I'm happy to work with the committee on changing that language because that's the intent. The intent is to put a check in place to balance out the rolling of the ball, excuse me, that's moving through the process now. I do want to address the amendments that I declined to take that you and I had spoken about versus the small canal versus large canal. And I understand completely that there is a desire to make it a small canal and not just let the large canal happen. And my feeling is if we have a check at the end of the process, that's not really needed. That you don't have to say to my constituents, yes, a small peripheral canal is okay. Because I think that's just as difficult as saying we're going to build a peripheral canal whether you like it or not. And that's kind of the impression that they're getting now. This bill doesn't say if the entire process recommends a peripheral canal, you have to have a peripheral canal. It just says when you go through that process, we're going to have all the information. We'll have all that data. And then we, as the legislature, as the elected representatives who are accountable to our constituents, will have that up or down vote. And that's the intention of the bill. And with that, I hope that we at least get a motion in a second.
All right, fair enough. Ms. Yamada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will move the bill and
Thank you.
hang in the air to see if we even get a second. I'd like to make some comments, if I may.
Please.
First, I'd like to thank Assemblymember Huber for her courage and her competence in bringing this bill forward today and her attempts the last time as well. So that we could get these discussions a little bit more out in the open. I did also want to thank my county supervisor colleagues being represented today by Supervisor Larry Ruthfelder from San Joaquin. The fact that these meetings are on Tuesday mornings when there are 295 county supervisors at work today. The subdivision of the state that counties are delivering the services that the state requires. I would like to thank him for being here today as well. One of the witnesses from Westlands referenced this discussion somewhat like Groundhog's Day. I think I would characterize it more like moles because there is not a single Delta legislator on any of the water bill package that was passed last November. And so had there been a Delta legislator with a name on the bills, I think that we might have had a slightly higher level of confidence that what was being proposed and that would affect
other than Senator Steinberg, obviously.
Well, Senator Steinberg, Mr. Chairman, we can have this debate either in public or private, but he represents a smidge of the secondary zone of the Delta. And I have great respect and fondness for Senator Steinberg on mental health issues, but on the Delta, I believe we will continue to differ in public and in private in the same fashion. For an area that is going to be the most affected in the state, for not a single Delta legislator to have his or her name on the bill package, I think is cause for concern. The opponents of your bill that have raised the issue of reopening this discussion, I think you've answered very well. This bill is not intended to reopen the discussion, but to simply continue the discussion in a much more transparent and open way and a participatory way. If there's nothing to be afraid of and nothing to hide, then I don't see any reason why anyone on this water panel should be afraid to move this bill forward. I think it's when people have issues that they would rather prefer not be discussed or not be debated in an open and transparent way, that you get the kind of opposition that we've seen today. So with that, I would assume that it's no secret where I would stand on this bill, since I am a co-author and happy to join you in this effort. You know, water certainly is one of the most critical issues, if not the most critical issue before us, not only in the state, but in the nation and the world. I think we all know that water is very precious. It's a finite resource. You know, if you believe in Einstein, it's neither created nor destroyed new matter. So we are with the water that we have. And, you know, sometimes you hear me joke about the water wars will be solved in this state when we start to run out of water for coffee or tea, depending on which party you're with on that. But I would just like to say that if yeah, cheers, Mr. Fletcher. But yeah, we hope that with your bill, there would be no fear of transparency and accountability. We have abdicated through the Delta Stewardship Council to a 7-member unelected body that I think our own chairman here has questioned some conflict of interest, rightfully so, and I don't think we've been answered on that point yet. So with that, I'm very proud to move your bill. Whether we get a second or not, even as a courtesy, it remains to be seen, but I want to thank you and thank all of the participants in this continuing water war discussion. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Rambula is next, and then we'll let Mr. Fletcher defend his choice of beverage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will Rogers once said there were 2 houses in Congress, Mr. Chairman, so that in case one of them got a bright idea, the other could catch it in time and kill it. I'm reluctant to give the legislature any additional authority. I believe that there are significant protections in place, and despite my high regard for Assembly Member Huber, I will not be able to support this measure should it get a second.
Where do you collect all these chestnuts like the Will Rogers Club? Mr. Fletcher?
To Mr. Rambula, Mark Twain once said, "Whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting over," which we did all last year and we continue to do today.
Did he end it in a preposition like that?
I think so. Over. With over what? I don't know. I don't support your bill. I do support water in the morning for coffee and then midday for tea in an effort to be bipartisan, Mr. Yamada.
All right. Other members of the committee wish to make any comments or questions? There is a motion by Ms. Yamada. I am not going to offer a second, personally, and I will just again state, Ms. Huber, personally, I would rather take my chances with existing law, that there is the ability for the legislature to require approval if a large facility completely redoing the way the state and federal water projects operate is advanced. I think there are good, sound arguments that legislative approval would be required, and I'd rather take my chances with existing authority than cloud that authority by creating a record that I think, unfortunately, if this bill were to move forward, would suggest otherwise. So I'll be with you on continuing to ask a lot of hard questions, and no one should confuse my failure to second this bill with support for a peripheral canal. I'm not yet convinced that what is under consideration is desirable or even feasible. But I think this is a complicated issue, and I think there are some unintended consequences that would unfold were this bill to move forward. So unless we see a second, unfortunately, Ms. Huber, you've done a wonderful job presenting your bill, and I want to thank all the witnesses on both sides, but it looks like it's going to fail for lack of a second.
No opportunity to close?
Welcome to close.
Oh, thank you. Because I think the really unfortunate thing about failing to get a second is that there will also be no recorded vote of this committee. So I know some folks for their constituent need to vote no and need to represent their districts, but that vote won't even be recorded. For Ms. Yamada, she will not have a recorded vote that she supported this bill. I do thank you for the opportunity to have the policy discussion. As you know, we disagree on the legal implications of having this bill move to the floor and have an up or down vote. I do not think that that in any way clouds the current decision making. I know it is in the committee analysis. I did check with the Legislative Counsel's office to confirm that it would not affect the interpretation of existing law if a bill were to move out of this committee and fail on the Assembly floor, and that is the opinion of our own Legislative Counsel. However, I recognize that for other reasons that folks cannot support the bill today. I do think it is unfortunate to not even get a courtesy second to have a recorded vote on something as critical as oversight and accountability of one of the largest infrastructure projects in California. And with that, I just want to thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. With that, we are going to move to our final bill of the day, and I'll ask Vice Chair Fuller to wield the gavel. Wield it.
What today? A Republican friend. Usually get seconds. People want to vote no on things.
Hey.
That was good. Right to vote no.
Okay, we will move to item number 2, AB 2304, Huffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Am I on here? Okay, great. Thank you. Madam Chair and members, AB 2304 promotes the protection of prime groundwater recharge areas, and sometimes when it comes to groundwater, we don't appreciate the value of these areas until they're lost, sometimes through contamination and sometimes by being paved over. And yet,
the bill's been moved.
Thank you. And yet groundwater is simply too important in the state of California to not take the common sense step of identifying the prime recharge areas, identifying the threats of those recharge areas, and getting that information into the hands of land use planning officials at the local level so that they can decide how best to protect those areas. That, in essence, is all this bill does. I have some witnesses here with me. There is no opposition to the bill at this point. We're continuing to work through the concerns of some stakeholders, but I think it's pretty straightforward. And with that, I will invite Chris Fromm, who I think is representing California Groundwater Association today.
Well, we've got a couple of.
Right.
Actually, we're going to go to Ken Manning first. He's the president of the California Groundwater Coalition. Ken, and then he's going to lob it back to me.
Perfect.
Because I'm here pretending to be Tim Parker, as you know.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Ken Manning, and I am the CEO of the Chino Basin Watermaster, the court-appointed agency that oversees all of the groundwater rights in the Chino Basin. We represent the western portion of Riverside County, western portion of San Bernardino County, and the eastern portions of Los Angeles County. I'm here, although today, as president of the California Groundwater Coalition, known as the CGC. CGC is a 501c6 organization which has been formed at the urging of state and local officials to help encourage sustainable local management of the state's groundwater resources. We believe that AB 2304 is consistent with the mission of our organization, and we're here today in strong support for the measure. And we're pleased to co-sponsor with the Groundwater Resources Association. Assemblymember Huffman has done a good job of outlining AB 2304, and it does, by the way, it's very important. I want to briefly add the CGC's perspective, if I could, which is that new requirements contemplated in this bill, mapping and identification of prime recharge areas, is something our members already do in large part. There are areas around the state that do not map or understand what the recharge areas for their groundwater are. Our members do this as part of their daily activity. We believe, as Assemblymember Huffman does, that groundwater basins need to be replenished effectively, and that we encourage the aye vote by this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm Chris Fromm, Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck, and I'm here today representing the Groundwater Resources Association of California, which has been very pleased to co-sponsor this bill with the California Groundwater Coalition. Our chairman, Legislative Committee Chairman Tim Parker, is what I call one of our groundwater nerds or gurus, and I'm a poor substitute for him, but the bottom line is that, you know, our members really believe that this bill is such a modest step in recognizing one key element that absolutely is essential to protect our groundwater basins as a resource going forward, and that is that we protect prime recharge areas. It's a very modest step. Our members, both at Groundwater Resources Association and California Groundwater Coalition, are very mindful of water rights. We have had conversations with folks. This has nothing to do with any of that. It really requires just identification of those areas which really play an essential role in the replenishment and recharge of our basins. And we are very pleased to work with Assemblymember Huffman and his staff on the bill, and we urge your aye vote.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any other positive support comments?
Chair and members, I'm Melva Bigelow, representing the Nature Conservancy, and for all the reasons you've already heard, we're in strong support.
Committee members, my name is Jim Metropolis with the Sierra Club. We are also in support.
Julie McClay for the Santa Clara Valley Water District. As the agency responsible for managing groundwater supplies in Santa Clara County, we're very pleased to support this bill, which promotes better integration of land use planning and water supply decisions. So we're pleased to support the bill.
Any in opposition? Any comments on opposition?
Madam Vice Chair and members, Steve Cruz with the California Building Industry Association. And first, let me say we have no formal position on this bill. We did receive some feedback from our members within the last couple of days with some concerns that I have in the last 24 hours communicated with Kate Williams and the Assembly member staff and with the sponsor and just briefly with the Assembly member this morning. And effectively, the concern is that this information, the mapping, and the identification of the prime recharge areas and also the potential threats, which can include urban development, that information that will be reported in the Urban Water Management Plan and then subsequently to the local agencies and directs them to adopt protections, or it uses the word protections in the context of updating their general plan. We're concerned that there may be some adverse effects on abilities to develop that property in the future and on the rights for private landowners. And so I think in talking it through, I think the way in which it's drafted, there may in fact be some unintended consequences that that we agree that we can work on. And so I do want to say first and foremost, we as the building industry fully understand the need to expand our water resources and recharge groundwater at every step of the way. But we need to make sure it's done in a way that doesn't infringe upon the ability to develop these sites in the future. So with that, I'll close and look forward to working with the others.
I appreciate that. And if I could, Madam Chair, we look forward to continuing that discussion. I want to assure everyone, though, that there's nothing in this bill that creates some new state-mandated land use classification or protection or anything like that. It's about getting information into the hands of local folks who are in the business of land use, and then they can decide what makes the most sense to protect prime recharge areas. It may very well be that if development is allowed on those areas, you're going to see some innovative strategies like that are already taking place in lots of parts of Southern California to retain runoff on site and help incorporate recharge into the development, not necessarily a ban on development. But again, our approach is to leave that to local officials to decide. We just want to get these areas mapped and get the information into the hands of the folks who make those decisions.
I like the concept of this. I just have some reservations. When we go to local control, we've seen many programs like this completely misused. When you go to the county of San Bernardino, they've had no problems with building. They've been able to address a lot of the issues that have been mandated. Yet in San Diego, they've associated all sorts of costs to it. and virtually brought building to a hold, and not particularly in this issue, but in these types of issues. You know, in it refers to principal contributor when talking about replenishing groundwater basins, but there is not a technical or scientific definition for that, and there's other terms that I'm uncomfortable with, because I feel like we just need to narrow this down considerably, because I don't want to leave it to some of the locals to interpret it the way they want, you know, the outcome they want, as opposed to what we're intending to accomplish. And for that reason, I'm not going to be able to support it today, but I'd like to work with you to narrow it down, because I would like to support it on the Assembly floor after it gets out of this committee. Thank you.
Other.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, again, Kevin Kaufman, Stockton East Water District. I'm sorry for the late opposition on this. We'd like to work along with the others that have mentioned concerns today. The Association of Groundwater Agencies and the California Association of Water Agencies, or Association of California Water Agencies. I don't think I've vetted this. There's committee meetings coming up where this bill is going to be discussed. My board of directors, the board of directors that I report to at Stockton East, are acting on this bill today in a position of opposition unless amended for the concerns that Member Anderson brought up, the vagueness of the bill. But we are 100% in support, Mr. Huffman, of identifying groundwater recharge areas and having that information out there and trying to protect them. We agree with you on that point.
All right. Good to hear.
Thank you.
Assemblymember Arambula.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, I represent a portion of the San Joaquin Valley, and a lot of the precipitation is in the form of snow that then runs off, flowing westward into the valley. And as a former county supervisor, I know it's important to protect prime agricultural areas. In this case, the bill is talking about prime recharge areas. It makes a great deal of sense to establish as many recharge facilities in a location that can be most helpful to meet the needs of the residents of the valley. And that is on the foothill area before it reaches the valley. Unfortunately, that's also one of the areas that is most rapidly developing. Right. So for those reasons, I support the bill. I think it would help to identify and protect those areas that are most suitable for recharge facilities, and it would leave it up to the local policy development to decide what to do with those parcels. But the first step is to acquire knowledge of where they are, and afterwards, I believe local control will address them in the correct fashion.
Madam Chair, I'm chairing a committee concurrently. Has the bill been moved?
And second.
Yes.
And second. Okay, very well.
Okay. Yes, Caballero.
This is in the comments section. I'm sorry, I just got here.
Yes, this is the comment section.
Mr. Huffman, I think this is a very important bill. I understand that if it gets out of this committee, it goes to local government, and that's. I have actually a lot of questions related to local government issues. Let me just kind of give you the highlight. I'm going to support it today because I think it starts us along a path that I think is important, but it raises just as many questions from the local government perspective as it starts to focus attention on recharge, particularly when you're talking about the land that local government can control within its own boundaries. So the one issue has to do with impact on neighboring communities. In many of our communities, you have city after city after city after city, and so if you're going to end up building and you have recharge and it's not in your area, what impact does it have, and can you really control it? So the question is, how does it work with built-out communities, and what's the impact on neighboring communities if
in other words, if
the
your
recharge
area is recharging someone else's aquifer, is what
absolutely, or if the recharge potential is right next door as opposed to what you control, and there's particularly as it relates to private land as opposed to public land, Williamson Act issues, and I think we need to at least have some kind of analysis as to a taking issue. As you start identifying that there's land available for recharge, do you then reduce the value of that land because you've said nothing should be developed there? It's very similar with how we treat ag land, and so we do Williamson Act kind of saving so that you're keeping it in production rather than or keeping it open space as opposed to building. So those are just some of the thoughts I had. I just wanted to raise them because it will go to local government next, and we'll have to sit down and talk about some of that. But I do appreciate what you're trying to do here, and I think it is an important step in the right direction.
I appreciate that, and Madam Chair, I think we can work through those issues in the local government committee, and I look forward to working with you on those, Assembly Member.
Yes, come on.
Thank you, Chair Fuller, and Mr. Huffman, thank you. I think this is an important issue, and thank you for bringing it forward. In local government, perhaps, or somewhere, although this is keyed non-fiscal at the state level, the local entities are going to incur some additional costs. And I just wondered if anyone had any conversation about additional requirements.
Yeah. To that point, the real meat of this bill is in the groundwater management plans that people have to prepare if they want to seek state grant funds. If you don't want to seek those grant funds, you don't have to do it. So that would be my response, Assembly Member. Yeah.
I just, it seems like prime recharge area is maybe not as traditional a term as in the past. Is there a statutory definition for prime recharge?
Why don't I invite one of my groundwater gurus to speak to why we have chosen that term and why we think it can be appropriately defined in the statute.
There's no doubt that it can be defined. It's a term of art that defines an area both geographic and topographically that can be identified as an area that develops water for a groundwater basin. And in terms of the mapping, it can be mapped. You can identify it both from a surface flow and from a percolation point of view.
I think my point was that it doesn't seem to exist statutorily, and so that would impose a new definition which is not current or at least not enumerated in this particular bill, and potential threat seems to be sort of in the same category, although I was not as concerned about that as the first one, and high quality groundwater, same thing. And the water law relies heavily on the long tradition in the past, and new terms can elicit a tremendous amount of controversy and fight without consistency necessarily arising. So I like the idea. I think we're sort of headed in the right direction, as you always are, on top of what's coming down in water. But from my standpoint, I think that I won't be supporting it today because I don't see reason to create a new category that could be defined variously. And secondarily, I think that leaving it to the locals in this situation with such a broad area of potential actions could actually leave them open to litigation should they not be in the right actionary mode in the court's eyes. So for me, I think this is just a little bit confusing for where we're trying to go, and I won't be supporting it today.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. We actually have had an ongoing dialogue with a number of the members. We have several water attorneys involved in the review of the bill, as well as technical people. And we've had some entertaining discussions actually about prime choice. And, we got off on the meat thing for a while. But the issue is that looking at the substance of it, there's two approaches. We can either go further in defining terms, or we can leave it at the discretion of local entities that are looking at it. And we are a little way through some amendments that would frankly take the latter approach, which would be making it clear that the determination would be at the discretion of the local agency rather than going further with definitional terms. But you are correct. There is not a history of looking at this issue, but that's to be understood in the overall context of the fact that groundwater basins historically haven't played the kind of role that we're looking at playing, that they must play today as far as an integrated water management system throughout the state. So I think along with some other issues, we're going to see some new concepts, and this notion of trying to take those natural areas that serve for recharge, identify them, and be mindful of them as a land use planning agencies look at those issues is going to be something that's important if we're going to integrate our water supply systems.
Well, I thank you for those comments. At this time, though, my experience in water policy is everything that is not explicitly clear when it comes out becomes a delay over time that is very difficult to overcome, as in our last water package. So I appreciate your efforts, and I'm sure you'll be moving forward with a lot of the enhancements, but we'll be watching, and I just think that to burden a bill with something with terms that require new definitions when traditional definitions are more clear is just a problem. Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
I just want to concur with you in your analysis. That's the big problem I have. What I'm worried about is not what you're trying to accomplish. I think it's great. I think you're opening Pandora's box on the way there. You know, I think without defining those, I hope that you don't go with the latter, you go with the former, because that's how I could vote for it. But I can't vote for it if we leave it to the locals, because in one area, their definition is completely different than the next area, and that inconsistency makes it very difficult to move forward. And I know this is kind of the egg and the chicken, but I prefer the egg in this instance. So, thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other comments, questions? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
would you like to close?
You know,
I'm
very,
sorry.
very quickly, Madam Chair, I just want to remind folks that last year groundwater was 40% of California's water supply. It is a big deal. And as you see surface water supplies becoming more and more strained, more and more conflict over them, groundwater is only going to become more important as a resource for meeting our state's needs. This is a practical step that simply gets information into the hands of land use authorities so they can consider it and not create, again, we're going to work through the issues that have been identified, but I think we have to do this if we're going to protect this critical piece of California's water supply. And the last point I just want to make for those of you with agricultural districts, this is a very ag-friendly bill because there's nothing more compatible with groundwater recharge than agricultural use. So identifying areas in agricultural use that are serving important recharge functions, I think very much complements the Williamson Act and other policies that we have in place to protect prime farmland. So with that, I would request your aye vote.
Do pass the Local Government Committee. Huffman?
Aye.
Huffman, aye. Fuller?
No.
Fuller, no. Anderson?
No.
Anderson, no. Arambula? Aye. Arambula, aye. Tom Berryhill? Blumenfield? Caballero? Caballero, aye. Delatorre? Fletcher? Lowenthal? Aye. Lowenthal, aye. Fuhrer? Yamada? Aye. Yamada, aye.
It's 2.
Thank you.
And we'll hold it open.
All right. So we're gonna keep the roll open to finish up our business today. We do have a few members that are going to be trickling in the next few minutes. Are there any absent members that are present now, though, that we can call on any of the other bills? Then we can let folks take off.
Number 6.
Can I just go through them in order?
We don't have that many bills. Why don't we just go through them in order and call the absent members, and then those of you that are complete on your voting can take off, and we'll keep the roll open for Mr. Fuhr and Mr. Blumenfield.
Okay. Item number 3, Bill Berry Hill. 2427, do pass as amended. Chair voted no. Arambula was not voting. Blumenfield. And that's it. Item number 5, consent, SB 808, do pass consent to appropriations. Blumenfield absent. De La Torre. Item number.
Consent calendar, Anna? Okay, thanks.
Item number 6, SJR 18, Semidian, be adopted. Chair voted aye. Anderson?
This is Smitty, no.
Anderson, no. Blumenfield? Fletcher?
Aye.
Fletcher, aye.
That bill is out.
I have you down.
Okay, Semidian bill is out.
And the Huffman AB 2304, item number 2, do pass to local government.
Right. I think we're just waiting on Fuhr and Blumenfield on that.
Yeah.
We're going to ask for reconsideration for Berry Hill's bill.
Okay, we've got a few more members that need, when they're complete, we'll grant reconsideration. So. We'll, as soon as we can get them, Mr. Fuhr and Mr. Blumenfield here, we will close the roll. So.
Blumenfield has three bills to present. So he asked them to stay open as long as we can so that we can have opportunity to real quick. That's why I don't want to get, that's why I don't want to set a time. Yeah, it's only his 3, he has 3 bills in judicial.
Fuhr or Blumenfield?
Fuhr.
Okay.
Blumenfield needs to come to get
Are you calling Mr.
at least
Blumenfield?
the Semidian bill out.
The groundwater bill needs 2, is that right?
Right.
Okay. You look. There you go. You're already meeting with their approval. Well, I have no doubt that I will encourage personal
Mr. Blumenfield's on his way. Mr. Fuhr's presented his bill in judiciary.
Thank you.
And he has 2. He's on his first one.
Knowing Mr. Fuhr is